I had this dream 4 years ago to build this village of cabins in nature. There's this drone shot where you're pulling out above the water and you see this beautiful cabin, perfect reflection, somebody kayaking, a little fire pit over here, a hammock over there. I believe nature is the space where people feel most alive. The holy trinity of like land amenities are views, water, and trees. If you're going to do something, you should give it 110%. Do fewer things, but do them way better.
Take care of yourself, get outside, get in nature, create something, go on an artist date.
I love that.
Go build something.
I'm building the dream that I want to experience. We launch on Airbnb. We have a fantastic launch. I'm already getting messages like, can you come build my house? 2 weeks later, I wake up, I open up the app. I'll never forget it, with a little red triangle, suspended, all 7 listings.
I think you're like me, and we'll jump in, but I think you're like me. I love the details, but I also like people to enjoy the space. I don't want to create a perfect space and then like be hovering over people, like not letting them enjoy the space. I don't know. Is that how you are?
Yeah, but it's a struggle because I'm a micromanager, whether I like it or not. So I have to know what the limits are, like when I should zoom in and when I should zoom out. And I think zooming out sometimes is more important for me because the zooming in part and like making sure everything's lined up kind of happens naturally. But
yeah.
Totally. Like hospitality is all about giving people space and making them feel at home.
Yeah. And so we're here with Isaac French in the Nook, which I feel really honored to be here. I've seen this place online. It kind of looked like a bit of a dream when I first saw it. And I've even seen it in your backgrounds, but it's a gorgeous space. I appreciate you having me out to Waco, out here on a beautiful, beautiful spring day. And these are all live oaks out here, I'm guessing?
A mixture of live oaks, cedar elms, and some other native Texas stuff.
Yeah, it's great. Beautiful drive out here once I got outside of Dallas.
Yeah. Most people can't believe. I mean, we're literally about 8 minutes off of Interstate 35. One of the most soulless drives, in my opinion, in like the country.
Yeah.
It's just urban sprawl and concrete. And you just meander off the road and take a few exits. And all of a sudden you pop out in this place. And yeah, we feel pretty blessed to be here.
Well, let's talk about that, because I heard you say about Texas needing something like Live Oak Lake.
Yes.
Because you built Scandinavian style homes essentially, or cabins in Texas. And you said that there's a huge shortage of these types of experiences in places like Texas. And I could name, a handful of other states that I think there's probably a shortage. Like, what is it about putting Live Oak Lake in Texas that was so important to you?
Yeah, so I didn't choose Texas. Texas chose me. That being said, I don't think I could have nailed a better place for the demand, both from a numbers standpoint, the number of people here in Texas, 22 plus million within 2.5 hours in the Texas Triangle, but also the hunger for experiences and for beautiful design. And Texas, I think a lot of Sunbelt cities are this way. Honestly, unless you're living on a coast or in a few regions that are like fairly uppity and exclusive, there's just not that much great architecture, period. I mean, in my experience here in this country. And so I didn't even fully appreciate the hunger for this Nordic design. And it wasn't just, pull out Pinterest and type in Nordic design. Like it was my own taste. Like it had a Texas flair to it. And it was adapted, most importantly, to the local terroir and like scenery and landscape. But once we launched, and so we launched Live Oak Lake, and I don't know if you want to get into any of the story there.
Yeah, I'm sure people that they might not know everything, but so give them
a brief nutshell.
Yeah.
So I had this dream 4 years ago, recently married, was self-employed as a bookkeeper, making $45,000 a year, had about $19,000 saved up. But I had this dream to build this village of cabins in nature. So I found this 5-acre parcel just 5 minutes from where we are today. And it was a jungle, but when I walked on site, I knew instantly this was the place. It had a little muddy cow pond, these huge live oak trees. It was a diamond in the rough. And so I bought it in 30 days, raised the money to close. It took us 4 months to get a construction loan to build it. But we went to town in the meantime building, which was a massive risk. We spent about $400,000 before we ever had a loan through a line of credit through another business.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was
so
crazy.
I thought you had your construction loan before you started building.
Oh, no.
Okay.
So I got told no, as you can imagine. I'm 23 years old, 24 at the time, and very little liquidity or anything. No experience in real estate. I did have some experience in construction. So I found some friends and family that agreed to give me about $100,000 to close on the property. And they didn't even have that as cash. I did not come from a rich family, but we're very industrious. They have a small construction business. They had a line of credit. So we basically funneled that operating cash from their business to fund the initial step to buy the property and then start funding the initial step. So we spent about $350 total because it took us a lot longer than I expected to get the loan.
Yeah.
So I was, as you can imagine, praying and doing everything in my power possible to talk to as many banks to try to get someone to give us a loan. It was obviously a key to have them as a personal guarantor, my family members with their small construction business. But we got an 80% LTV construction loan. And for the problem was the appraisal on the project was $1.8 million. I was budgeting $2 million. We ended up spending $2.3 million because of all of these design detail finishes and whatnot. So we had about a $600,000, $700,000 shortfall. So meantime, I built, so I design and build Live Oak Lake. That's 9.5 months chunk of time. Craziest year of my life.
I mean, to be able to do that in under a year is nuts anyways.
Yeah.
Like any real major construction project in under a year is pretty nuts. And then to build 7 structures.
And designing
plus,
it and like the landscapes and everything. But simultaneous to that, built a $750,000 spec home in 4.5 months and sold that. Was able to use a lot of the same subcontractors, suppliers, et cetera. So there were some scale economies there. I just hit the timing jackpot perfectly because we were in a massive post-COVID boom here in Texas and, profit about $200,000 on that house. Was able to roll all of that into Live Oak as well, get it over the finish line, and we opened the doors January 10th, 2022. Back to where I started with this, we launch on Airbnb. We have a fantastic launch. People are coming from Dallas, Fort Worth, the big cities within a couple hours, and just raving about the design. I'm already getting messages like, can you come build my house? So to your question about architecture, I realized, there's a lot of intangibles here that people want. They love the experience, but they want this, they want to live in this. And that's kind of when it really started to solidify in my own mind, this is truly unique to Texas right now. And part of it wasn't just the architecture, it was the place, all the things that make a place. So again, the trees, the water, the landscapes, honestly, I think more important than the architecture itself. But when it all cohesively comes together in this magical experience, it moves people. So I've told the story before, but we launch on Airbnb. 2 weeks later, I wake up, I open up the app. I'll never forget it. Everything is grayed out with a little red triangle, suspended, all 7 listings. And so I get on the phone with Airbnb. Not sorry, Mr. French, there's nothing we can do about this. Different department. They're independent for a reason. If they need anything, they'll contact you. So after 2 or 3 days of this, you can imagine, but I was so stressed out. I wasn't sleeping because my entire business shut down. $2.3 million of other people's money mostly. And so I, as fate would have it, was told about this travel influencer here in Texas that was starting to do these giveaways. And she worked with restaurants primarily, but she was also starting to work with some Airbnbs. So I called her up. I was like, hey, is there any chance, I'm in a real pickle here. Is there any chance I could get you to post my property and promote it? She had 200,000 followers at the time. At Dallasites101 is her Instagram handle.
What was that?
At Dallasites101.
Okay, Dallasites.
Yeah, shout out to her. And she was like, sure, $950 is what I charge. It was a brand new business for her too.
With 200,000 followers?
Yeah.
Only $950.
Yep.
Wow.
But again, she was mainly working with restaurants and she had just started some Airbnbs and stuff. But that's a little trick. A lot of the people that follow travel influencers, food influencers in a region are the perfect candidate for a unique stay. If they can appreciate fine dining, they're going to appreciate an experiential accommodation. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if you have a place that has dining or is nearby really good dining.
Exactly.
They go hand in hand.
Exactly. Yeah. Not necessarily just roughing it in the boondocks, but
yeah.
So she posts this giveaway. I throw up a bookings website overnight, we already had a website, but like, building out like the booking engine, Stripe integration, messaging for like all the direct stuff, and test it. We go live, offered a discount to her followers so that, because only one person's going to win the 2-night stay, but wanted to capture some traffic. Was not prepared for what hit me. $40,000 in direct bookings 1 week later, and about 5,000 followers from scratch.
So you got 40,000 from the giveaway.
Yes.
So just people that saw the property.
Exactly.
And they likely even probably entered to win the giveaway too, right?
Yeah, they were booking long before the results were announced.
Because they just wanted to stay there.
And again, only one person's going to win. And they're like, this is amazing. This did not exist in Texas. It was unique. Architecturally, they could tell experientially. And by the way, our photos weren't that great because we had just launched. And so like there was still dirt, like the landscaping hadn't really grown up and whatnot.
Yeah.
But so it was really that moment. And then to put a bookend on that, Airbnb restore our account like 2 days after this giveaway. So if we hadn't had that little window that made me think outside the box, this major adversity and like really brought me to my knees, I would not have, I eventually would have tested Instagram, but I highly doubt I ever would have like taken it seriously. When that happened and I realized the ROI of influencer marketing done right, and really my first taste at like content for social media, because then like as a result of that post, someone on TikTok with another travel account that was also just spun up, posted it without me paying them anything. They were just like, oh, this is a cool place to stay. Millions of views, another like $25,000 of bookings. It was wild. And so I realized people are mesmerized by this one little chunk of Texas, this 5-acre slice, because we had like several different angles. And again, it's like Instagrammable moments. There's this drone shot where you're pulling out above the water and you see this beautiful cabin, perfect reflection, somebody kayaking, a little fire pit over here, a hammock over there. You kind of have like all these ingredients. So it was from that day forward, fast forward 6 months, we had about 50,000 followers in the first 6 months, pretty much exclusively from these giveaways. I went all in on them.
And that's on the actual account for the property.
Live Oak Lake account. I wasn't doing anything personally.
Nothing personally.
Until a year later, probably.
Okay. And so what percentage were direct bookings?
Biggest regret I have, by the way, like not actually building in public and building a personal brand back then, if you want to call it that. But basically just like highlighting the creation of it, because I have a friend. Do you know Devin Lorop?
I've heard you mention him before. You
got to meet him because he's out by Seattle.
Yeah. But the storage.
Pacific Bend.
The Pacific Bend. Yeah.
1.5 million followers in a 12-month build because he's just documenting it with his iPhone every day. And people eat that stuff up. But
what is it about? Because he's a younger kid, right?
Yeah.
And you were young when you started. He's doing storage containers. Like, can anyone share their story of building?
Yes, as long as it's something that truly is cool. Like, so there's two main ingredients. One, it's like you as the creator, your background, your experience, your personality, and that's probably your most valuable thing because nobody else can replace that. And only you have the experiences that you have. And the more unlikely your background, sometimes the more of an advantage you have because it's more relatable to all these other people that are trapped in their jobs that are meaningless and going nowhere and unfulfilling, that want to escape that as well. And so they see you as this risk taker. And so that's number one. Number two is the actual concept itself. So that's made up of the land itself. The land is kind of the main character of a story sometimes. That doesn't mean that you need to have the most over the top, ridiculous views, incredible once in a lifetime place, but you need to have the key things. You need trees, ideally. These are outdoor concepts. There's more urban stuff too, but the stuff that I'm really passionate about, ideally, like the holy trinity of like land amenities are views, water, and trees.
Yeah.
And it's very unlikely you're going to have all three, but you need at least one of those. Mm-hmm. And then you can usually add in like a water feature, or you can of course plant trees, but anyway. And so land is important. And then like, of course, the architecture and the amenities. But I think way too many people over index on amenities just for the sake of it. And I see some of these properties, it's like a full blown resort, but it's not very tastefully put together. It's like you have, the pickleball thing and you have the huge mural, and you have the cold plunge, and you have the sauna, and you have all of these fancy, it's like a sandwich of amenities. But there isn't really, there isn't a personality, there isn't character to the property. And I think people can feel that. It might look really impressive, like at first glance, but you're certainly probably not going to have a lot of repeat bookings with that. You're not going to build the kind of cult-like following that even like Live Oak Lake did, where people came back 4 times in 1 year and brought people with them. What's hard to put your finger on is, what is that? Like, what makes people do that? And I think that, again, it's the way that you present it, it's the person behind it, the story that you're telling. So for me, I mean, from the marketing, from the very first impressions online to the messaging to, I'll give you an example, a tangible example on site. You may have heard me say this, but I realized, like, how many Airbnbs have I been to that they gave me like these old laminated sheets of paper of like instructions.
Yeah.
We've all had that experience.
Yeah.
And how can we make that not only like bring that up to par, but like make that an opportunity to totally blow me away? Mm-hmm. So I literally spent a week of my time during that launch, right before that, like 40 plus hours on Canva, designing my own custom guest book, reading through, this is before ChatGPT, reading through 60-page instruction manuals for the appliances and combing out the most important details, putting it all together in a fun to read coffee table book, essentially, with my story, with our story in it, local favorites. And this seems really easy, but it's so overlooked for so many people. And that was one touch point that contributed majorly to the trust and the reputation that I built, and the desire to want to come back, because the guests felt a part of our story when they came. The messaging is another way. These are the software parts, if you will, of the experience. The hardware, of course, needs to be good too, like the cabins, the landscape, and
yeah, because I think what you're alluding to is with the Airbnbs that you see now with the amenity stacking compared to the experience of when you show up and following through on the promises that you make, right? So even if they have all the amenities, you show up and it all looks a little junky, it's not maintained. Honestly, for me, now I was just having this conversation with my wife. I don't know how houses can be sustained as a good short-term rental, because the ability to keep everything maintained, the economics just don't work, right? And then your amenity stacking and the things are falling apart. Your housekeepers can't do everything. They can't clean every wall. They can't clean every shower properly. Like the house itself, because of the economics and the time required to flip these, I just don't believe that properties and houses as short-term rentals can ultimately really sustain themselves.
Versus, are you saying a purpose-built, say, micro resort
with a full staff,
got it,
on site? The economics can support the people and the follow through on the promises that you make. And also, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't own a micro resort, but I don't think the wear and tear is necessarily as much, especially if you're catering to couples and maybe smaller families versus like, short-term rentals that are amenity stacking and there's kids parties and everything. Yeah, parties and all this stuff. It just can't withstand the abuse.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. So we only had 2 part-time people running the whole thing. And then, of course, on top of the cleaners, and then a couple subcontractors for, like, I think the mowing, the lawn care was subbed out. But basically 2 people were running the whole thing, plus myself as kind of the GM / like marketing guru to kind of like initially figure out all of our marketing stuff. But basically that was one person monitoring all messages. So we did so much as far as automations that really felt personal to people, that, and this is again, very low hanging fruit. A lot of people are doing. I just don't think they're doing well enough. Too many places you go and you get these messages that just feel like, especially today with ChatGPT, like ChatGPT wrote this, like, or it's way too formal. Mm. People are just, it's even like on the short-term rental side, but certainly on the hotel side, they take themselves too seriously.
Yeah.
That does not contribute to the warmth of hospitality that you want to feel.
Yeah. These messages of like, bathe in the luxury of this, I'm like, just like back off a little bit. Yeah. I'm a normal person. Talk to me like I'm a normal person.
Well, here's the funny thing about messages. So we have church one night a week, and I knew I was going to be tied up every Wednesday night from 7 to 9. So I went ahead and crafted this message that went out at like 5 p.m. as an automation. And some of it's like, I'll even purposefully lowercase something just because I wanted to seem very kind of off the cuff and spontaneous.
Yeah.
And like, hey, just want to check in. I know you guys just made it here. I'm going to have to run to an event this evening, so I probably won't have my phone on me, but I'm going to be around for the next hour. If you need anything, let me know. Otherwise, I'll be back online at such and such a time. And I realized like we got more engagement off of that one message. People would automatically, and 95% of it, they didn't need something. They were just like appreciative that I checked in, and they felt like they were truly being cared for, because that little window, that little communication signaled to them, okay, this isn't the classic pre-arrival, post-checkout, the hallmarks that you need for messaging. They're actually, they must be on call 24/7, and they must care about me. So even though we had very little staffing for that, say, it communicated so much care. And I think after we moved, we either like canceled that event, or like our church canceled, whatever happened. I wasn't going anymore to that, or maybe it was a different night of the week. I went ahead and left that message there just because it was like, people love this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an opportunity to engage with people, especially offbeat from the normal cadence of the messaging, which, like you said, you do need, because if they're checking in and they're frustrated and something happens, you need to head them off and make sure that you can take care of them in the event that something's going wrong. And then, but being offbeat and personal and the lowercase lettering, I love, because you do want it to feel more casual. We're not trying to play tricks on anybody. We're not trying to make it a smoke and mirror show. We're not trying to create an unnatural environment. You're being yourself by doing that. Just because it's an automation doesn't mean that it's any less you.
There are points too where it's like, it's hospitality, and you better have, if it's not you, you better have somebody close by, or ideally on site. We had people call, message at 11:30 at night. They couldn't get the door to open. Of course, I would call them up, explain it to them. Sometimes they still couldn't do it. I'd have to get out of bed and drive over there, because it's hospitality.
Yeah.
So ideally because I made the compromise of like, we're not going to have someone on site because I want this super lean and mean, which really helped our bottom line.
Yeah.
You have to be, or have someone in position, even geographically, to go and do that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, I do think that you can be very thoughtful with those touch points, and even like, of course, the welcome gift and some of these things, and over deliver on, so think of like hotels and resorts at one end of the spectrum, and like commodity Airbnbs at the other end. But you have this huge spectrum in between there of even like the concept itself. So how many, what the property, what is a micro resort? What is a landscape hotel? But also, what is the hospitality? So at one of these Airbnbs, especially today, they're so commoditized in general that it's just Vacasa or XYZ, exactly, property manager that doesn't really care. And a lot of people really hate that. There's a place for it. It's very transactional though. And on the other hand of like, or let's not just say hotels and resorts. Let's say it's the Four Seasons. It's like a really esteemed, hospitality-centric, fine resort. But I, for my own personal taste, and I don't think I'm alone, feel like that can be overbearing sometimes. Mm-hmm. When you go, and I have, and you experience that, it's awesome, and it's nice to be pampered, but sometimes it feels like it's too much. It's like, I'm trying to get away, and I'm not getting away. It's almost like, put yourself in like, this is not analogous totally, but like the president's shoes, who's constantly surrounded by Secret Service. It's like, I want to like go take a break. And
yeah, you can tell that they're always watching you.
Yeah.
Because they're doing it so that they can serve you better.
Exactly.
But they're always watching you. Like you leave your room and then you come back and there's like something.
Exactly.
And it's like a gift or something really cool.
Your book has like bookmarker, like where you were reading it, and it's closed.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's like, okay, guys, like, thank you. But
that's cool to experience at least once.
I think you should. Yeah. Cause it does give you good ideas for other things that you should be doing. And owners should be going and benchmarking this stuff, like, and write it off and 100%. Do all that. But, so I heard you talking about the Canva book. We're in an amazing creation that you created that's like meticulously designed, and I can see the elements. And I've heard you talk about how much effort and design work and attention to detail that you put into Live Oak Lake, and I'm sure that you put into everything. What are your thoughts on perfectionism versus shipping a product? Perfectionism versus done is better than perfect.
I don't subscribe to the approach that you just need to get 10,000 reps in. They say if you do 10,000 hours of anything, you become an expert. If you're starting out, you just need to do. So apply this to content creation, apply this to architecture and design, building projects, you name it. You're a doer, you're doing something. I think there's a place for practice. And the way I look at my own story and like career, if you will, the first, and I had a very unusual upbringing. I was homeschooled. I grew up in a very, it was very family centered, but like we had all kinds of businesses. So I was going to say like business. It was very entrepreneurial. I was starting businesses from the time I was 6 years old. So I already had some level of just competence in a lot of different realms. I was into bookkeeping. I've always been an artist. So I had like this unique mixture of skills. So I look at all of those 24 years before I did Live Oak Lake as my reps, even though this was an entirely new venture. But I believe that if you're going to do something, you should give it 110%, and you should try to be absolutely the best in the world at whatever that thing is. And of course, you're not going to be the best in the world, but unless you aim for the stars, you're not going to even hit the moon. And so with Live Oak Lake, it ended up being this big hit. And there's a lot of things I wish I had done differently. There's a lot of ways I feel like I could have even made it better. But I'm sure glad that I had as big of dreams as I did when I built it, because now that has become inseparably attached to my reputation. And I'm okay with that, because for its problems, it's still a pretty cool project. And then since then, I took on the Nook, which was this dream workspace you talked about, and built that. But I gave 110%, and this was only my second project of this kind, but I would say is quite a bit better in terms of even like from a detail construction point of view than Live Oak Lake was. And now this is part of my reputation, part of the image and the brand, if you will, that people associate with me. And so do fewer things, but do them way better, I think is the general piece of advice that I would give to anyone. I know that you have to balance that with actually getting the reps in and whatever the thing is that you're doing. But especially if it's something that you're trying to build a public image around, but even if you're not, I would recommend this. But if you're trying to grow a following on social media, or get the attention of investors or whatever, your reputation is so important. And a brand is to a business what a reputation is to a person. And I take that and I think in today's day and age, not enough people take that seriously enough, just in terms of like, what do people actually, and I think this is something I certainly credit to my parents, what do people think about me? Not in some kind of a egotistical way, but like, how good is my word? Apply it to that. Like, there was a lot of emphasis put on, and I think just some basic character traits that were imparted to us, that if you said you were going to do something, you do it. And then people start associating it, and your word becomes incredibly valuable. And that's something that I think our culture has lost over time. But now apply that to the quality of work people do. And I think this ties right into this idea of craftsmanship that I've talked about, where especially like with the proliferation of artificial intelligence, which is awesome because it can free us up to do some things. And yet I also have mixed feelings about just delegating your entire life to AI, because I think you lose some of the meaning and just sort of can begin to become kind of a robot. But I think that in light of that, in spite of that, there is this counter reaction where people want the human touch. They want personal taste. They want to buy products that feel like they're handmade, like they're slightly imperfect, but there's care behind it. So maybe care is the common thread between all of these different things I'm talking about, as far as how to build a reputation. Like, you have to care about it. You can't just do it because someone else said it was a good idea.
Yeah, I think that's what we're seeing, like you said, with the commoditization of Airbnbs, is people saw it, they see the photos, but they just throw it together and they just don't have the care. And it's very transactional now.
And I think even from a design perspective, totally. There's people and they'll see, and they'll even throw around these terms like, what's the ROI on this design? And I get it. But again, they view it they view it in terms of strictly dollars and pennies. And so if they can squeeze an extra $50 per night out of a room, if they invest $15,000 into it, they'll do the math. Oh yeah, this is a great return. It'll pay for itself in a year. Let's do it. And then they have no personality. They have like no story that attaches them in that design. They're just hiring some designer that comes through and that's made a good deal on that too. And not across the board, but 90% of like the stuff that I see as far as like Airbnb designers or even boutique hotel, some of it just is people latching on, even these terms like experiential hospitality, boutique hotels. That one famously, Ian Schrager, Ian Schrager.
Yeah.
The OG who kind of crafted that term and built like an incredible reputation off of these projects he did in New York back in the 80s. He distanced himself from that term because he was like, this has become so watered down, it means nothing. So now he calls it lifestyle hotels. But now that's becoming diluted too. So you have to even find a way semantically and brand wise to communicate who you are, who your identity is in a way that's fresh, that's authentic. And that's why I like these terms like landscape hotel. Though that term now, I see so many people even like on Instagram throwing that it's just a matter of time before that'll be watered down as well.
It's really great that we're having this conversation. And we were talking before this about, you were asking me like kind of what's my whole point of doing the podcast and why am I doing this? There's a few different things, but one of them is I want to meet and like people like you. I really want to attract creatives. I really want to be around people that are more creative, more tapped into design. As soon as the boutique hotel term came up, I think I saw a reel. Someone bought a motel in some rural area and they were like, we bought a boutique hotel. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to call it boutique hotel. Like, I don't even want to use the term anymore, but we got to find something else to call it.
I saw somebody buy an RV park that was like trashed out and call it boutique hotel.
Yeah. And that's okay. Like, that's just like, we're not gonna be able to stop that. Right. But I'm with you. And so I got the chance, and I've told the story on the podcast a couple times now, but I got the chance in Joshua Tree to tour one of the top 10 architectural homes in the world. I can't say which one it was. Maybe offline I'll tell you. It took 30 years to build. It is a piece of art built into the rocks. It is absolutely insane. There's no traditional walls, roofs, ceilings. It's all made out of concrete and glass. It's this incredible piece of art. And I was standing in the middle of that thing and I felt so at home, so normal, so like, this is what I'm supposed to build. These are the types of things that I'm supposed to build. And so now I've been kind of contemplating. I'm saying I want to build art in nature. That's what I want to build. I want to build art in nature where I want to connect people with themselves like they've never been connected with themselves before. I agree with you. I think the AI revolution, I think it'll be great in a lot of ways. I've already seen a lot of benefit in efficiencies, just handing stuff off, but it's going to drive more people to need to connect with themselves. And then I want people to connect with nature even more too. I 100% agree with you. The landscape is the main character of the entire place, and the less disturbance you can do and the less artificial manufacturing, even planting, you have to be really good at planting to make it feel natural. But I want people to experience nature the way that I've been able to, where you see animals, you see the interaction. I know that you grew up in the Pacific Northwest a little bit, and I've said this a lot of times. I think a lot of people that are in other states where there's less quote unquote nature, they don't understand the interactions that happen and how important it is to all of us living together in this. Like up in the Pacific Northwest, you have the salmon runs, you have the streams, you have all the different weather systems, you have the mountains, you have snow, you have every type of season and every type of weather, and it all interacts together to support each other. And then you have all the animals that are dependent and feeding all that. And I want people to be able to be in an art piece like the Nook in nature with coyotes or other animals and birding. And, it sounds kind of nerdy, but like really being able to watch and interact with nature in a way that they haven't been able to before.
I think that's really well put. And I've said it a few times, but I believe nature is the space where people feel most alive and true to themselves. And so for those that haven't spent a lot of time in nature, it can be especially life-changing to get out and take a trip. I wish everyone would, stop what they're doing this summer. And if they haven't, go visit a national park. Like a lot of people do, but go somewhere out of, ideally too, also it can be helpful to see your backyard, but also go to a totally different environment. So growing up in Texas, before I moved to the Pacific Northwest, our family would go to Colorado and sometimes Maine. And that was just the best because, well, for one, Texas isn't a great nature state. There are some pockets. I think I'm living in one, but yeah, there were these, transformative experiences that will stick with me for the rest of my life that I had. And it wasn't because we were climbing Mount Everest, for instance, but we were in these beautiful settings and that there were trees, there was a smell associated with it. There was sound, there were birds, there were fish. And so nature is where people feel most alive. They feel most connected. And I think it goes back to I'm a Christian, and so in the biblical worldview, man and women were placed in a garden, and I really believe, like, again, that's what we're all longing for. There's certain kind of wholeness and there's certain peace that people feel when they're in nature settings. And for me specifically, like, gardens are and gardens again can be a huge spectrum. I would even say like a forest. We could be in a fairly wild atmosphere, but that's kind of a garden in a certain sense, because you have biodiversity, you have trees, and you have grass here, and we have some rock formations. Of course, we've done some minimal plantings, but it just starts to feel like a garden because we're tending it, but we're doing like 5% and nature's doing like 95%.
Yeah.
And that's being generous to me. We're mainly just like clearing out the weeds and the things that we don't want. And so there's this intentionality behind it, but you walk outside, and that's the whole point of like where I even placed the Nook here.
Mm-hmm.
Like with these windows, that was the idea with Live Oak Lake. It was all about bringing the outdoors inside.
Mm-hmm.
The architecture is beautiful, and I want that to shine, but it's those true shining moments that happen actually outside and that invite you to go outside through the architecture, through the windows, through the doorway that we craft for people to go and experience, that really change people, and that really, I believe, like, turn experiences into these memories that bring them back over and over again. If I think about some of my most favorite experiences really in my entire life, I would say an unusually high percentage of them are all based in nature, some form or another. And so completely agree with you. I want to give that to other people. And I think it's a gift worth giving. Like, I don't think nearly enough hospitality people are doing this. It's all about amenities. It's all about some of these other things that can become a distraction.
I totally agree with you. The amenities can become a distraction. So tell me, why is design the greatest amenity?
Design is the greatest amenity because it influences absolutely everything. So design to me is that intention and that care, like so many things we've talked about already, really make up the principles of design. It's doing things with intention, and there are principles of nature that we actually look to. I look at nature as the ultimate design.
Yep.
There are principles of, proportion and colors and color combinations and harmony that you find in nature. And at all different scales. You find it in the ecosystem and like the circle of life ultimately, and the proportions of animal populations relative to plants, or there's so many ways that you can take this. But design is integral to all of those, because it's like, how do you put pieces together in a way that works, that sustains itself? So take that kind of philosophical framework and now apply that to architecture, apply it to branding and messaging, apply it to the landscapes that you craft, sometimes in harmony with nature around that architecture. Apply it to the amenities. Do less, do fewer things, but do it better. Design is not about how much money you spend. I talk about this too, but it's like the concept of having taste. I think that some people naturally, like, you hear the phrase, she has such great taste. You should ask her, like, does that outfit work or whatever? You can actually apply a lot of things, like from fashion to design, to architecture. And it's really interesting because I do believe some people naturally have a better sense of style, or like a better eye, for sure. I'm not a formally trained designer, but I'm an artist. And so I think I probably naturally have more inclination towards what works well visually. But what's been game changing for me is becoming an intentional observer. Maybe that's cliche, but what does that mean? It means being extremely careful and intentional with what you consume. So if you're reading magazines, if you're scrolling social media, I'm not just like, it's kind of like ChatGPT. It's all about the prompt that you give it, and what you train it on, the data that you trained it on. And so, like, I want to find people whose taste I admire in the fields of architecture, interior design, landscape design, whatever domain, in creative domain it is, and then study exactly what they're doing. Like, I believe this is the key, and it's simple, but it's straightforward, but it's hard work sometimes to actually be consistent with this, and notice the places that you enjoy the most, notice the houses that you like, the hospitality experiences, and then start to see over time what is the consistent through line between these things. And sometimes it's like, sense of space. So how is the lighting constructed here? Actually, I think a lot of hotels like probably are the epitome of the best design we have. So like a lot of residential developers and architects should be taking cues from some of that boutique hospitality.
Yeah.
Because they get it with the vibe.
Yeah. And they should, I think that's why Airbnb succeeded for a long time too, is because people were doing things at homes, creating spaces for people. The ones that were doing it really well, they were creating spaces for people that others were unwilling to do, or they were living in a spec home, a builder grade craftsman in development. They were never going to be able to create this kind of oasis or this softening place of peace, their bedroom of peace, this like with the textures and the linens and the wall colors and the way the space interacts with each other. I think that's why Airbnbs did well. Part of the reason in the beginning is because we were creating that for people that they just couldn't even fathom in their own homes, or were unwilling to do, right? People didn't want to do any wallpaper or spend any money on them on their own property because it's a spec home in a development. Whereas now, actually, my wife, this is what she's starting. She's going to start doing some coaching around, and I don't want to call it coaching necessarily, but creating spaces for yourself, like to make you feel better. Right, actually go into your spaces and do some intentional design and like declutter and that sort of stuff, like Marie Kondo, but design wise, for your own space, especially for moms and people that just have a lot going on.
It's amazing how place has and architecture and design have so much to do with how we feel and our health, not just like mentally or emotionally, but physically. And so I've been diving deep down this rabbit hole of placemaking, which is basically like, there's a whole movement called new urbanism, especially in this country, where architects, land planners, engineers, developers are coming together and thinking how we can create better towns, better homes, better places to be, places to live, places to congregate that are inspiring. Because again, to like where we started with Texas, this is one of the epitomes of like bad places in so many ways in terms of like, you have urban sprawl and subdivision hell that everybody has their little cookie cutter lot and block that is totally commoditized to the next one. And all of that lack of care, that commoditization totally comes through, like translates all the way down into the DNA of the people living there. And I think there's even studies that show like, and especially like where you're born or where you grow up, but you in your physical body contain DNA that is inextricably tied to the geographical place you're from. And not just like that latitude and longitude, but like the surroundings and what made up your environment. And I certainly think this applies mentally, but like people, that's why I invested into this space. It's like, if I'm going to create stuff, I need to be in my perfect habitat to do that. And I'm pretty spoiled to have this, but like everybody can have their corner and should have their corner that they polish and if you're not that creative, then have somebody come help you who is. And again, become an intentional observer. Everyone can do better, but I'm all for like the democratization of design. So all of us, we shouldn't just be outsourcing our design to 2 or 3 celebrity designers. We should be flexing that muscle and building that and going to our creative gym and working that out day in and day out to develop better taste ourselves and to build better spaces for ourselves for people that we love.
I think that's the great thing about design is I was watching she's a new designer in Airbnb, and I saw something that she did and she put a plant there and this there. And I was just thinking, I was like, I probably would have done it totally different, but I absolutely love this. And I think that's what's so great about design and people flexing their design muscle is you get to see them expressing themselves in ways that nobody else can, because it's uniquely you, right? And I think it's a canvas that everybody can leverage. I totally agree with you. I mean, I'm sitting here looking at your, this is a charcoal drawing that Isaac did. He has this charcoal drawing of the nook that we're sitting in. It's absolutely incredible. There's perspective. He has also a drawing on the drawing table of his child. Is that, yeah, I won't say his name, but, and so Lucas, I think Lucas, sorry.
No worries. No,
Isaac, I think you're I think you're a special person and uniquely gifted to be able to be doing this stuff and talking about this stuff. Not everybody has this perspective. And so like, what do you recommend if someone is wanting to think about design or to study or become an intentional observer? What is your advice for them?
Shameless plug for my friend Hans Lorei. Do you know Hans?
Yes.
You should totally. Yeah. So he's awesome. And he writes this fantastic weekly newsletter. He's probably been the single biggest influence on my life in terms of design. And I didn't find him until a couple years ago before he had really any following. I found him on Twitter, and then he blew up on Instagram. He makes great content and really breaks down some of these principles. He's not a formally trained designer. He's a real estate agent, but he's very creative. But he's a great example of somebody who you don't need to be a designer to be fantastic at design. But I would say like some practical things of being an intentional observer. I think that the natural manifestation of that is like you need to invest in experiences. And so travel is one of the best ways to actually expand your horizons design-wise. You go to another country. We went to Europe this past year and spent some time in the Netherlands. Speaking of place, it's incredible. Like the sense of the charm of their communities and the walkability and, you know, the little corner bakery and the coffee shop and bicycles, and everything has just been designed for people and by people instead of for cars. And so it feels so much more human and there's a warmth to it. But spending time there, spending a week there, we went to Mexico, a little village in the mountains of Mexico, third world country, but there's an incredible charm to it. And I was so inspired by both of those and other experiences by both of those places. We went to this luxury resort called Babylon Store, and it's maybe my favorite hotel in the world in South Africa. And what I love about that is it's an 8-acre, in my opinion, like the world's most beautiful garden, at least functional garden. Like every plant, produce, fruit you can imagine is grown there in the most pristine, spectacular aesthetic setting you can imagine. And then they have this Cape Dutch white stucco architecture blending in. So it's just magical. But those are 3 very diverse experiences right there in diverse places across the globe. And each one immeasurably contributed to my own sense of taste and style and inspiration more than anything, and like creative energy to go and create more and produce more. So get outside of your comfort zone and invest in travel and experiences. And it really can be an investment where it's not just, in other words, a euphemism for spending money on vacations that you don't need. I tangibly took away valuable, and not just design, but hospitality principles from all of those. I think that, let me think about this. I think that sketching is a great habit, by the way, that more people should do. I should do it more, but as a kid, I did this all the time. Had a notebook with me, would go around, like if I was walking, I think our phones distract us so much these days, we wouldn't even have time for it. If you just walk down to your park, maybe you just walk outside, you start sketching perspective, you mentioned, like structures, and you start seeing planes and 3D, light and shadow. So yeah, there's a lot intangibly with growing up. My grandma gave us art lessons, and all my siblings, I have 9 siblings, and myself. And that was a weekly discipline, but it became something that I really loved. So she totally nurtured a gift that was already in me. And maybe I was gifted at art or whatever, but some of my siblings weren't, not at least from the get-go, but through that discipline, they became better artists than me in some ways along the way. And I have seen, and I think they'd probably tell you the same thing, but I have seen even some of those experiences ramify into the houses they've built, the places they live, the things they like. So like sketching can be very powerful. And that, all you're doing there is you're capturing, it's kind of like taking notes. If you're listening to an incredible lecture and you take some notes throughout, and you're capturing the most salient pieces of it, even if you don't go back and reference it, just that process of note taking is going to memorialize it in your brain, right?
I love that. I've never heard it put that way before. That's such a great way to think about it. It makes it a lot more approachable than having to think that you're going to go create a piece of art, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All you're doing is you're copying the greats. And in nature, you're copying the greatest, like the best design.
Yeah. Have you read The Artist's Way?
No.
Oh, you should. It is basically, it's sort of an entrepreneur book, but it's all about that we're all artists. All of us are art, and we all have different art. But what you just described about going on a walk and going and sketching something, that is called an artist date. And that is something that the book prescribes as a weekly activity. You go on an artist date. It doesn't have to be walking and sketching, but it's like no phone, nothing else. You're just creating something just for the sake of creating and not creating something for purpose, for money, for ROI, for judgment, it's literally just time for you, the artist, to sit down with yourself and do something that's creative with your hands or your mind or whatever it might be. No distractions, no devices, no nothing.
I love that.
And there's you may not know, I don't know if you know the rapper, her name is Doechii. Have you seen her pop up? So her story is incredible, but actually when she committed was after she read that book. And there's this thing called, you also do the artist pages, which is journaling every day, essentially. And she followed the steps in that book. And then that's when, right after that is when everything started hitting. That was a few years ago. And then obviously now she had her Grammy moment. But I love her story. I love that it's tied to The Artist's Way, because that was a book that was pretty influential for me too.
I'll buy it.
But yeah, you should check it out. So I did want to get back to, it's still on the design topic, because this is something that I struggle with. Is the ROI piece, is how do you draw the line? So how do you draw the line of perfectionism and making something that your vision compared to what's getting done and your timeline, and then the money spent versus the ROI that you're going to get on the back end, right? Especially with the unknown, you didn't even know that you were going to get all these extra direct bookings. And that came after the Airbnb, banning or suspending your listings. How do you figure out if the time and energy and money that you're spending on the design and this handmade guest book and the messaging and the tile finish and the way the roof line comes together on the building, like how do you know that all that's going to work out? Or how do you know how to draw the line?
So I don't want to assume that everybody has the same vision or, the same things that I have. And I'm not saying I'm special, but some people clearly have more vision and more. Also, it's not just that, but it's like the ability to follow through and execute. So you may have all these wonderful dreams, but then you're going to execute them really poorly, or, 20% or 80%. And you're missing that final 80% of value that would come, you know what I mean? The 80-20 thing.
Yeah.
So it's really hard for me to give you some kind of prescriptive advice. All I would say is if you're listening to this podcast and you like the conversation already, there's a good chance that you care a lot about design and creating vibes and creating beauty is really, to simplify it all the way down, for the world. And so it's really this idea of being an artist. And if that's true, then you have to really stop looking at so much from the ROI perspective. Did you know that I did not do a single bit of quantitative analysis with Live Oak Lake of any kind of comps or research on rates or what we could charge? I had to do a simple model that showed, look, I think if we rent this thing out for 70% occupancy at $200 a night, we can easily cash flow this for the bank. But if you saw my numbers, it was so crude. I didn't even know what AirDNA was. I didn't do any kind of research. So much more art than science. And I really think that when you even start bringing up these, again, this very now common question about amenity ROI, for instance, if you add a hot tub, how much? Okay, yes, there are models that can tell you, but that's so subjective because that so much depends on, I'll give you an example. At Live Oak Lake, we have 7 cabins, okay? 5 of them are basically identical as far as the layout. They're 2 bedrooms. The other 2 are identical. They're 1 bedroom. But they're all positioned slightly differently on the property. They're all beautiful in their own way. I put a ton of care into placing each of them, but they're different. They have a different view. They have the same amenities. There's a lot of same between them. Did you know that the 1-bedroom cabin, one of the 1-bedroom cabins, Lakeside South, was consistently the highest ADR of all of them by probably 30%. Had nothing to do with the size. It was this one shot I was able to capture of that cabin that was just iconic. And I still use to this day as my main shot for Live Oak Lake. And so I assumed when I built that, well, if I had the 5 2-bedroom cabins, then, we're naturally going to get 30%, 20% more, whatever it was on those. But that's not what people were coming for. They were coming for this this experience, this moment that they wanted to capture. So now apply that to the design decisions that you make. If you're less geared towards like, what are the, mathematical calculations that I need to come up with this, and just like that entire framework, I'm not saying there isn't a place for it. There is. You got to actually make it pencil, and like but I think those are different processes, and you have to learn to decouple of that. Decouple those things. If your natural tendency, and this isn't necessarily mine, but is to look at the numbers or to ask those questions, that's an invaluable gift. But if you're going to be this artist, you're going to have to learn to put that aside and give yourself the space to be the artist. So what did that look like? The first 3 days after getting under contract for the land at Live Oak Lake, I spent on site with literally like no phone, by myself, walking every square foot of that property, spending quiet time, trying to understand the land. I know this sounds cheesy, but at that stage, I was like letting the land speak to me of where should we build these cabins. I was considering we could do 4, we could do 10 on the low and on the high end. And I had some general math in my head I'd done before finding the property of like how much I thought I could build for per square foot and how much we could make. And I knew that was the general range. But then it was all about like, what is the very best thing we could do for this piece of land to give it, to make it everything it was meant to be. Was not thinking about numbers or anything like that. Then once I had this concept kind of roughed out a few days later of exactly how we'd position the cabins, then I started like actually putting pencil to paper and saying, okay, this would work. Yes, we could build these for X amount, and I think we could rent them for X amount. But then from that moment, I didn't have, I hired a Fiverr freelancer for a few $100 to draft some plans that I did napkin drawings on. And so we didn't even have like firm architectural drawings, very, very open-ended, no details. I myself was on site. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs to do this either, but it was so helpful for me. And if you do want to save money, and if you want to wear all these hats and value engineer, be on site, talk to the contractors, learn to balance practicalities with the aesthetics, and great design merges those two things so seamlessly that it doesn't feel like a compromise. And this is maybe terrible advice, but let the finances take a back seat, at least for a period of time. And then at intervals, you might need to check in. So I mentioned we went essentially about $500,000 over budget at Live Oak Lake. Now that sounds crazy, and I built this other house to help fund it in the meantime. What that was the result of an uncompromising vision that I was maintaining from that first moment I walked on site that carried me all the way through to the day I opened and realized that vision. You know what that realization was? What the fulfillment was? When we soft launched, we had a family reunion where all 9 siblings and grandparents and cousins came together from across the country. It was a perfect soft launch too, because we could all kind of like they could be easy on me and tell me all the things that were wrong.
Yeah, this faucet isn't working. Exactly. Yeah, the baseboard came off and the
roof fell down when I was in that.
Yeah.
No, it was great. And that moment though of like being together, being in nature, it was like incredible. I can't put words to it. But that was the fulfillment of a dream that I had. Even like the reflections in the water, like there was a feeling that I wanted to capture, and it was captured through that. So you got to learn really to like have the overarching vision that says that sometimes requires a lot of like zooming out and maybe even being philosophical, but what is the feeling that I'm trying to create here? And then every decision down to the forks that you choose to put in your drawers needs to contribute to that. So the first step of the journey for me is like what Hans calls a design Bible. You come up with like the 4 or 5 design things. So that could be, Nordic architecture, live oak trees, kayaking on the water, and Japanese garden kind of Zen landscape touches. And you want to cap it about right there. Then you basically like you marry these concepts together. Here at the Nook, it's like this Japanese simplicity, minimalism with Texas, like rugged hill country limestone with, and like, cowhide rug, with like Nordic white oak finishes inside. Those are 3 very unique elements that I'm marrying together. But then every decision down to the smallest details needs to be made with that beacon in mind that's pointing the way, that Bible that's telling you exactly what to do. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it's so much more about the art and the vision than it is about like, is this going to make sense if we add this, if the guests like it? Does it contribute to the feeling or does it not?
It's a perfect answer, honestly. And I'm really glad that you said that, because I think more people need to hear that, given the commoditization of a lot of the things that are out in this world. I think I'm now, as we're going through these conversations and meeting with more people and having it just reinforces my desire to go create this stuff.
A crazy example, this will be quick, but you know what Amangiri is?
Oh yeah.
Crazy experience. We stayed there, $6,000 a night when we stayed. It's this 42 unit landscape hotel, maybe the best in the world in the Utah desert. $6,000 ADRs, 95% occupancy, crazy successful. They built that in 2009, and the developer, you've probably heard the story, but it was crazy how they even got it together. They got the land through a federal land swap. Crazy experience. Like, I don't know how they actually pulled that off.
I want to know more about it. Yeah. Like
Ben
literally
knows the developer.
Yeah. He's working on a project. Yeah.
Well, him and then Homie, who kind of took it over, but the architecture piece, that was in 2009. It took them like 4 years to do the whole thing, I think. But the architecture, just look at the building costs. They spent $3 million by my calculations. They spent $150 million on that, on phase one. Now they've added Camp Sarika, which is glamping. $150 million to build 42 units. That's like over $3 million per unit, including the land. That is absolute insanity, especially in 2008, 2009, during the Great Recession.
Yeah.
But that was the product of an artist. And it was a collaboration, but Adrian Zecca, who founded Amon, was one of the most incredible visionaries ever. Incredible taste. He doesn't own it anymore. I don't know if he's still alive, actually. And then he worked with this architect, Rick Joy. There was the development piece, the land piece as well. But there's some great stories of like when he went and found that land, he turned down like 20 properties that were absolute like best in class properties on the market. He's like, nope. The property they built on was not on the market. It was the federal government. He's like, no, we have to find a way. If we're going to do this, we're going to build it right here. And so they literally moved heaven and earth all the way up to the president to transition this piece of land. Yeah. Which is a whole nother topic.
Yeah. I don't even want to know how they did it.
It's crazy.
Yeah. But they bought the land. They had the land already in place. He hadn't seen it yet, but they had already bought it.
They'd already bought it.
And then he showed up on site. He looked around, and then he looked across the canyon or whatever. He's like, no, I want that land.
Yeah. Dude, it's mad. Have you been?
No.
It is absolutely magical though, too. Like the way that the whole thing is the product of an artist.
Yeah.
And so like that is irreplaceable. None of those numbers made sense. And I don't know how profitable most of like the ultra luxury places are not profitable initially. But like today it's by far the most profitable, has to be,
Well, and
an iconic experience.
Yeah. And I talked to Ben about this. He asked the guy that he's working with, he asked him, is Amon more impactful to Amangiri, or is Amangiri more impactful to the Amon brand?
Such a clear answer, I'm sure.
Yeah, Amangiri. Yeah. No one in the US knew the Amon brand until Amangiri came around, but they had all these other resorts all over the world, but that one in particular was the icon.
You look at the social media followings even. Yeah. All the others have like 20 to 50,000 followers, and Amangiri is like 600,000.
Yeah. It's insane. I don't know what it is, but it's evoking emotions. And I love what you said about walking the property, and like, it's not nerdy. It's not woo woo. It's not weird. Like, I 100% agree that everybody should do that.
Well, if it is, just embrace it.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
it works.
Yeah, it works. I mean, yeah. So let's talk about how it works, right? So you went over budget, and then you sold. You sold your creation. An artist sold their work.
You got to put money on the table. You got to put food on the table. You got to put like money in the bank initially. So I'm in my late 20s, but we have 2 little kids. All of my chips were tied up in that, and it was an incredible project. But I felt like we needed, from really day one when we even first finished building it, I became very emotionally connected to it and attached, and it still is like very much my brand, if you will. But I realized like, if somebody came along and gave, and maybe this is like the greedy financial part of me, but it was like, if somebody came along, initially the number, believe it or not, was 3 million. It's like when I had just opened. Part of that was probably too, like, I just wanted to take a break. And I felt like that would be a ticket. I was like, oh, somebody paid us $3 million. Cause I think somebody actually reached out like literally right when we finished it. And then I was like, no, this is when we started getting cash flow and I kind of started annualizing that out. I was like, no.
Yeah.
Then it was 5 million. I was like, okay, if somebody pays 5 million, we spent 2.3, we'd have to do that.
Yeah.
And then I was like, about 6 months in, I was like, no, I don't think so. And then it was like 6 million. And then, yeah, fast forward 18 months from when or about 20 months actually from when we opened it, we sold it, and we had gotten multiple offers by that point from like big private equity names you would know, that have to, I guess the lesson, the takeaway there is they see the writing on the wall. They see this massive opportunity in experiential hospitality. And now since then, with Marriott acquiring Postcard for hundreds of millions of dollars, I think the asset class, if you will, if you want to call it that, has officially been validated now. And I would not even compare those at all as far as Postcard to the Live Oak Lake experience. I think it's a testament, though, that these big private equity groups were willing to consider Live Oak Lake when it was literally 7 cabins in the woods. However, with the social media following that eclipsed several big like global hotel chains because of this whole art aspect and this experience aspect. But yeah, so we ended up selling for $7 million 2 years after building, and it's been a wild ride since. I thankfully got some time to like slow down, and then I built this and just regrouped. And now I feel like I'm in this really just exploratory creative phase where, I mean, I wasn't doing art for a couple of years because I was so busy with all these things. Now I actually have time to read, to do some of these things on top of a lot of consulting and stuff like that, but stuff on my terms that I want to do, and learning really from other people, experiencing other properties, other hospitality experiences that are continuing to shape me and help point to whatever the future holds. But at the end of the day, it felt like it was going to be foolish to turn down, $4.5 million of value creation in 2 years. And I also really wanted to like make good on the investment that my dad and brothers had made. And they did well with all of that. And with the bank, of course, as well. I wanted everybody to be like happy and sort of solidify. There's obviously, and probably like if I do another one, I'll probably never sell it. But there is something to be said for like having the full life cycle under your belt. I'm one of the very few in the space that can say that. And so now it makes me all that more credible to, if I want to raise money or whatever, I can show like there's a full track record here. And I may well do that. I may not raise money, but nonetheless, it helps my reputation.
Yeah. I mean, you sold it, you don't own it anymore. You locked in your profits, but it is still your brand. Exactly. It's almost as if you own it.
Yeah.
Still, right?
It's a little bit dicey though, because now I don't have any control.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say too much, but let's just say it takes a lot to maintain a property like that.
Yeah.
And especially the hospitality aspect.
Yeah.
And if you and so without me there, I still know the GM actually quite well. So somebody I hired that the new owners retained, and I have a lot of confidence in them, but I don't think it's quite the same. And I think people still love it. I actually still talk to people. I recommend it to people a lot, but it's a little bit like, well, at any point they could neglect to maintain or keep up or whatever. Yeah. I mean, today after our podcast, somebody flew in from out of state to come stay here, and just because they wanted to experience it, and they emailed me, and so I'm actually going to meet him. But that kind of stuff happens all the time. The bigger my brand gets now personally, the more exposure Live Oak Lake gets, which is great for them. But now it's kind of like, well, that is mine. Like I did create it, but you can't like hold me on the hook for exactly what your experience is today. So that element of like, again, as a micromanager by heart, just like knowing I can't control your experience, I hope it's good.
Yeah.
Is a little bit, but it's good for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, my other mentor, Rich Summers, he says the same thing. The sooner that you can get in a full cycle deal, the better off you're going to be. I talked to Ben about this. Like Ben is basically like, if your brand is sort of based off that first deal that everyone finds out about, right?
Exactly.
And so the sooner that you can go and do that, which we're in a process of, my wife and I are getting rid of selling a lot of our real estate. I'm considering like selling everything for the reason that you said. Like, you've been able to take a break, you've been able to create, you've been able to sketch more, like you've been able to reconnect, like,
and let life deliver to you the next opportunity instead of feeling like you have to hustle and go hunt it down and force it. That's something I've been very conscious of since selling, because a lot of people are like, what's next? What's next? What's next? Well, I actually have a very full life as it is, which is great. I don't complain about that. But I feel these expectations of like, well, now I got to go and over deliver. And it's good. Like, it's a blessing and a curse. Having Live Oak Lake as this, smashing hit as number one was awesome. And so I feel this pressure, but I also am like, no, I need to just like relax and do these other things that creatively fulfill me, and let life bring the next opportunity to me instead of me forcing it. It's just the whole thing's going to turn out way better. And you're going to be much happier in the process, I think, too.
Have you read Rick Rubin's The Creative Act?
Yes.
Yeah. He says create for yourself first, and then the audience comes last, which I absolutely love. And it's a really good reminder, because the secret sauce is when you're creating for yourself, it's so much more from the heart and impactful and purposeful and with care than if you were trying to consider everybody else or an audience. And it's hard in hospitality because you sort of are considering the audience, right? Because they're going to be staying in your space. But if you're creating it for yourself, or like you said, your family that all stayed there all together, then that's going to be a more authentic experience and a more impactful experience for everyone that comes and stays anyways.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. Build for an audience of one. Like, Live Oak Lake is exactly what I wanted to take my family to from that day one of experiencing the property. And that was also a guiding light for me of like not worrying about what the indicators seem to be in the economy or market, like what the other experiences were. I did go and stay at some other Airbnbs because I just wanted to test like what the state, even like the hill country, had to offer, which is kind of the mecca for cool Airbnbs. And I honestly was a little bit unimpressed with what I experienced. And so that was helpful to like encourage me, because the process is so grueling, and to keep making those sacrifices and not compromise on the design and some of the details. But at the end of the day, it was very much like, I'm building the dream that I want to experience. And what's fun about the Nook is that I got to do that with a space that I do get to experience every single day. And let me just say, it is so worth it having this space. Like, I spent a ton of money on this, and time and effort and whatnot. And people would, a lot of people would probably look at me, and I actually haven't really publicly disclosed how much, but like if they saw this relative to net worth or whatever, however you want to look at that, and be like, oh, you're crazy to invest that much into this space for yourself. But the way I see it is like, no, this is, for one, it's very nice and fulfilling to have this space after all of this other sacrifice, these seasons that I've gone through. But looking at the future, this is the best investment I feel like I'm making, because I am setting myself up to create the highest potential that I have as far as projects, other opportunities, content writing, which is something I enjoy too, the art, of course. And so again, like, I want to make that point. Everybody should have a space, but especially if you've been in a season of like just grinding and hustling, and maybe you're doing so well financially that you need to recharge. But this is also a good opportunity to like consider, where do I work? Where do I spend the most time? And this applies to a home too. Maybe it's a home office, but like, what is a space? I call this the Nook. It's like, this is my corner of the world that I am going to polish to be the nicest it can possibly be for what this is. And I think everybody should have one of those spaces and invest in that, because you're investing in your future and all these other projects that are going to flow from that space. Yeah,
we need to take care of ourselves. We need to take care of ourselves first. It's one of the reasons that I started the podcast. Was I got burned out. We were living in the Airbnbs while they were being constructed, like construction dust, air mattress, the crew's showing up at 6 a.m. You're digging through boxes, you're ordering more boxes, you're eating crappy food. But we were doing it because that's what we were so committed on, the vision of what we were going to do. We were getting out of the trap. We were making like a life for ourselves, right? And then now is the period of like, okay, I need to pull back, and I only want to really work on one thing, right? And so right now it's the podcast. And then, like I mentioned before, I'm going to go create art and nature, just like you did with Live Oak Lake.
I really want to steal that because that's really good.
Yeah.
I'll credit you, but
Yeah.
and I promise you I'll do it justice. Like I won't
And if there's another way to say it,
denigrate it. But that's simplicity is such a gift, but art in nature captures what I'm trying to do too.
Yeah, and it doesn't quite get the hospitality side, but that's if it's art, then it's art. And it's not, I don't know, maybe it is you sitting out in the woods and creating something. I don't know. I think that's where I'm at. The people that I'm talking to, this is a very recurring theme right now. This concept of rest and space and design and connection, more so than I think I can remember in the past 5 years, right? I think a lot of people are desiring this, and I want to help bring that. And really, it comes from a selfish place, right? Because I want it, but I want it for other people. So I
think that's the concept of like, the golden rule of like do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Like you could say it's selfish because you're creating something that you want, but there's a good chance you're human and they're human too. They want the same thing. And so I just see that as empathy, and you get to benefit in the process, but it's such a beautiful way of actually realizing, oh no, I'm doing this for other people, but at the same time, like it's its own reward. Like I'm satisfying this urge inside of myself too.
It's all I can ask now. Now that I've experienced more life and gone through some really hard stuff, it's all I can ask is that everybody gets to experience life and go do the thing that they most want to do and experience connections with themselves and other people and nature. Like we're a capitalistic society. Yes, we need to work. Yes, all of that stuff. And take care of yourself, get outside, get in nature, create something, go on an artist date, like go build something. And that's all I can ask and desire for other people is to do that. So Isaac, dude, this is incredible. I thank you so much being in the Nook, being here talking to you. This has been so great. And everybody, as always, where can they get a hold of you? Where do you want them to go?
On socials at Isaac French _, but the thing that would make my day is if you go and subscribe to my newsletter, which is isaacjfrench.com. You can get it. Spend 6 hours every week writing something that will take you 3 minutes to read. If you're into art, design, craftsmanship, hospitality, real estate, you're going to love it. Yeah.
And then you have a community, experiential hospitality, which I'm in, and there's a lot of heavy hitters in there. There's a lot of people. There's Buck, Ben, basically everyone that's Hans, anyone that's created anything in the resort.
Kimball and Christine, the Cliffs. It's like the consolidation of the best minds in experiential hospitality. And that's why selfishly I built that, because I love to connect with these people and learn from them. And at the same time, like be helpful. So if you're interested, if you're already operating or far enough along in your journey that you feel like that would be helpful, reach out. That's invite only. I also have a masterclass for people that are getting started out. And I basically share the top to bottom blueprint for Live Oak Lake, complemented by 15 other experts from various fields. And that's experientialhospitality.com.
Yeah. And it's very well done. And I appreciate that I got the invite to be in there. And thanks, dude.
Thank you for coming out. Like the fact that you took the time and like booked a ticket to fly from a different state and like drive 2 hours to come to the Nook says a lot about like how much you care about art. And you mentioned you're starting out on this whole podcast journey. I think that's going to serve you very, very well, because you're doing things with intention and you're doing fewer things, and that you're having to by default say no to a lot of other stuff to do the things you're doing well. So.
Yeah. And I'm continuously like every week I'm like, what else can I say no to? What else do I need to say no to? Because this podcast feels really great. This feels like something that I meant to do. And it's like where all my attention and energy should be focused right now. So
you're a great interviewer too. You got stuff out of me I've not shared before. So
I know. And I listened. I listened.
The thing about sketching like was totally off the cuff. Like I hadn't even thought about that, but it's true. Like writing is the exact same thing, but just applied it to art.
I love that. Yeah. So anyways, thank you so much.
Thank you.
As always, everybody, I appreciate you. I love you. This has been For Your Own Good. Peace.